It all started with a quiet Saturday morning. Susan sat at kitchen table, staring at a calendar that seemed fuller every day. The noise of the world outside, the ping of Susan's phone, and the emails piling up felt like a storm she couldn't escape. She sighed deeply, wondering where the time went. Every day felt like a race, yet Susan never seemed to reach the finish line. As Susan glanced at the clock on the wall, a sudden thought struck her. Am I really living, or just existing? It wasn't always this way. There was a time when Susan's days felt meaningful, even joyful. But somewhere along the way, Susan had traded her passions for obligations, her dreams for deadlines. She remembered a friend once telling Susan, "Time is the only thing we can't get back. Don't waste it." Those words had felt distant back then, but now they echoed in Susan's mind with a haunting clarity. That evening, as Susan scrolled mindlessly through the phone, she came across a story that made her stop. It was about a man who had lived a life full of regrets. He had spent decades working tirelessly, chasing promotions, and saving for a future he thought would bring happiness. But when he retired, he realized that he had missed the moments that truly mattered. The birthdays he skipped, the sunsets he ignored, the conversations he cut short. All because he thought there would always be more time. Her heart sank as Susan saw her own reflection in his story. She realized she had been telling herself the same lie. I'll have time later. Time for family, time for friends, time for herself. But later was never guaranteed. The next day, Susan made a decision. She would no longer let life pass her by. She would take control of time. She started small. Each morning, Susan set aside just 5 minutes to sit quietly and think about what truly mattered. At first, it felt strange, almost uncomfortable. Her mind would wander to her to-do list or the emails she hadn't answered. But over time, Susan began to feel a shift. Those few minutes became her anchor, a way to remind herself of what was important. One day, during her quiet time, Susan remembered a story her grandmother had told her as a child. It was about a farmer who spent his whole life planting seeds, but never stopped to enjoy the flowers. She hadn't understood it back then, but now it made perfect sense. She realized she had been always planting seeds, working hard, saving money, building a career. But Susan had forgotten to enjoy the beauty of the present moment. She decided to make a change. Instead of rushing through days, Susan started to look for moments of joy. She took time to watch the sunrise, to listen to the laughter of her children, to call an old friend just to say hello. These small acts didn't take much time, but they filled Susan's days with meaning. One evening, Susan sat with her son as he worked on a school project. He was frustrated, struggling to get everything just right. "Why does it have to be perfect?" he asked. She paused, then said, "It doesn't. What matters is that you try and that you enjoy the process." Her own words surprised herself, but she realized that they were true. For so long, Susan had been chasing perfection, thinking it would bring happiness. But now, she saw that the real joy was in the journey. As weeks turned into months, Susan noticed something remarkable. She was still busy, but she no longer felt overwhelmed. By focusing on what truly mattered, Susan had let go of the noise and clutter that once consumed her. She learned to say no to things that didn't align with her values, and yes to the things that did. One day, Susan found herself sitting on a park bench, watching the world go by. A young couple walked hand in hand. An older man read a book under a tree, and children played with wild abandon. She realized that everyone had the same 24 hours, but how they chose to spend those hours made all the difference. She smiled, knowing Susan had finally learned the lesson her friend had tried to teach her all those years ago. Time is precious, and it's up to us to make the most of it. The next morning, Susan wrote a note and stuck it on her fridge. It said, "Today is a gift. Use it wisely." Every time she saw it, she felt a sense of peace. She didn't need to do everything, but she could choose to do the right things. And in those choices, Susan found the happiness she had been searching for all along. Her story is a reminder to all of us. Life is not about counting the minutes, but making the minutes count. It's about cherishing the moments that matter and letting go of the things that don't. So take a deep breath, look around, and ask yourself, are you living the life you want, or the life you think you have to? The answer might just change everything.